Hello everyone, how's it going? It's me, Jaylene, also known as Fem4. Today I want to talk a little bit about how to get these good vibrations going, but first I want you to hit the subscribe button below. Bzzz. In this video talking about vibrators, we're going to be talking about how these little or potentially big gadgets came to be in the first place. We're going to be covering in this video basically who invented it, the myth of the vibrator, why the birth of the vibrator, and how it actually became a toy and not a medical device. Number 1. Who invented it? Joseph Mortimer Granville, who's actually a doctor himself, he invented this shaky machine back in 1833. Long time ago. It was electrically operated with the idea and gesture that it was a body massager. Number 2. The myth. The myth here that even I have fallen for before too is that doctors have created this machine and they were using it for doctors to treat women in their women's hysteria by giving them a practical massage down below. To explain why that's actually a myth is because if you actually really look back in the day in 1833 when these inventions were made, the idea of the high power vibrations that we feel with a vibrator nowadays that actually do get us women and people with vaginas off, it wasn't as high vibrations as it was before. So it's actually a very shaky, almost uncomfortable machine that probably would actually not really stimulate our genitals as much as we would have wanted it to. That doesn't mean, however, that with the evolution of the vibrator, which is actually proved to be the 5th household item actually as an electronic device, did not really give people ideas of like, hey, this actually feels really good on this hot spot of mine. Now we're moving on to number 3, the birth of the vibrator. Like I was mentioning before with the myth of the vibrator, it actually did not really start with doctors treating people with women's hysteria. It really was just a loud, clunky, almost a steam engine of a machine to help as your body massager. Furthermore, the clitoris is not very accentuated in Victorian society as something to be focused on, as most vaginas were viewed as something there for the male pleasure. But in concordance to the myth, it doesn't mean that people didn't start experimenting with this vibrator into different areas, into those little hot spots of theirs. Basically back in the early 1900s, that's when kind of ads started kind of focusing on deriving into maybe potentially this can be something we can sell it for. Slowly they started transferring into these things are made for women, as with women it was more considered a medical thing because our horniness was not actually something that was viewed for pleasure, it was more something seen as a medical condition. So how to help you get rid of it, basically. And even if in this unfounded history it really was meant for doctors to actually give people massages to kind of cure them of their women's hysteria, it did not actually really take note of that's something to be for the woman's pleasure. It was actually just totally in terms of curing them of this gross, weird sickness that we have. If being horny was a sickness, I think a lot of us would be in the hospital. Alright people, now we're focusing on number 4, which is basically how did it become a toy and not a medical device to cure people with vaginas of their horny sickness. Typically in the past, female-identified people with vaginas have been seen as people who are supposed to have a lot of shame on our sexuality, squander that down, and while everyone else can go out and explore. Crazy! But then, during the sexual revolution of the 1960s, heck yes, we actually started kind of coming into the sexual revolution of, hey, we can actually have just as much sexual pleasure as male-identified people, people with penises, and we shouldn't have any shame about it. Obviously, it was a huge no-no when it happened out because generally the male-identified people were considered to be the ones who are in control inside and outside of the bedroom. Yet, vibrators started specifically coming out and advertising themselves very plainly as something that is derived for femme pleasure, so not to heal them of their horny sickness, but actually for them to explore the orgasm and have fun with it. One of them being the very famous Hitachi wand. After all people, only a quarter of people with vaginas can orgasm through penetration alone. Hence why we have the beautiful clitoris, and once we've discovered that, we're not gonna let that spot go. Do you need help finding the perfect vibrator, the perfect sex toy? Well, you can always contact me for a Q&A question just down there. It's all confidential, and make sure you also subscribe to my other links because we have some bonus content in lieu of this video here. And also subscribe and like to share the sexy sex side. Thank you so much everyone for watching. It's me, Jaylene, Fem4.